Welcome everyone, we are live for our daily crypto show, and today we have some breaking news just out from Binance. After all of the threats that have been made in the past and the insinuations that this was going to happen, Binance has finally announced that it is going to be delisting BSV. And immediately after this, you had Shapeshift follow. They're saying that within 48 hours, they will be delisting it. Also, there's rumors that Kraken may be following. We're going to be covering all of this in the show today. And with me, as always, I have Chris Karabats, aka Zaphoid from Smart Cash. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Hey, Naomi, thanks for having me here. It's a fun day in a developing situation. Is that news lingo-y enough?
Absolutely. Developing situation. Our man on the ground. No, but this is pretty crazy what's going on. So let's back up a little bit by a few days. You had this lawsuit, you had all of these things going on, and we'll go into detail about that in a second. But really, the first time that we thought that Binance may go ahead and delist BSV was on the 12th, just a few days ago, when CZ wrote a tweet that said, Craig Wright is not Satoshi, any more of this shit, we delist. And that sort of steamrolled a bit of a movement where people were saying, yes, this should be done immediately, etc., etc. And then more lawsuits came about. It seemed like crypto Twitter was just taken over with people on both sides talking about lawsuits here and there, and Calvin Ayre got involved, and it's just kind of getting crazy, and now they finally announced it.
Yeah, that was, honestly, a little unexpected that they actually pulled the trigger on it so quickly. I was expecting them to nurse this a bit more and see a bit how things shook out, but CZ, he sees which way the winds are blowing, and it's quite obvious what the Twitter sentiment is about this whole situation and how everybody's basically done with Craig Wright, and they are just ready to move on. And Bitcoin SV is a good proxy for being done with Craig. So delisting that means that people will hopefully have to deal with Craig more, or rather less. And it was just this whole lawsuit was just, the straw that broke the camel's backs, and everybody just really ready to pile on Craig and just be completely and utterly done with his persistent trolling while claiming to always be the victim of trolls.
That is pretty much what's going on. What I also find interesting is because I try to talk with people on each side as much as I can, and just get the lay of the land, figure out what's going on from both sides of the camp, and I think it's important to do that just to see where the mentality is. But the thing is, I don't talk to many BSV people. Like, I don't think I've ever met a BSV person who doesn't believe that Craig is Satoshi. And I think that's an interesting phenomenon in itself.
Well, people like having a figure to follow. And whether or not Craig is Satoshi, he is a personality that people can get behind. And truth be told, some of his complaints about Bitcoin are reasonably valid, about needing to have something that can be used for business and needing to have larger blocks of transactions, yada, yada, yada. He's just a horrible messenger for it. So he's always nobody likes hearing him talk about, like, yeah, we may think you're right about these things, but we hate the coin you started. And the threats he's made too are just over the top. From the start of the hard fork between BSV and BCH, just where he's like, nobody's going to trade for years. It'll be the biggest crypto winner. No coin will be able to trade. We're going to, just like,
we got all the best people. We're all like, it sounds like a very similar kind of rhetoric, right?
Yeah, and the only way he got listed on several of these exchanges, like Kraken, for instance, is really by a lawsuit threat back then. And so the fact that another lawsuit is actually resulting in him being delisted is, if I say him, I of course mean BSV, but we all know that BSV is nothing without Craig, and nothing with Craig, as the case may be. But we all know that a lot of these exchanges would not have listed BSV without a lot of the pressure from the lawsuits. And also, to be fair, I think the practice of exchanges not giving their customers the coins that are forked off the coins they held is not the right answer. So I think it's good that these exchanges are hopefully giving people a chance to withdraw all their BSV, even if they're not allowing it to be traded on their platform anymore.
Right. I do want to give a huge shout out. So, Tao Jones just sent through a super chat in Google. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And he says, I'm publicly disconnecting from SV. BCH, please. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your support there. And I've also added in my Power Chat link for Bitbacker if anyone wants to send crypto. I always appreciate that. It helps me keep the channel going. But also, if you have any questions, feel free to send it through there. We'll answer on the show. Now, just to start off here, I want to read out this announcement that Binance put out 3 hours ago. They said, fellow Binanceans, at Binance we periodically review each digital asset we list to ensure that it continues to meet the high level of standard we expect. When a coin or token no longer meets this standard or the industry changes, we conduct a more in-depth review and potentially delist it. We believe this best protects all of our users. When we conduct these reviews, we consider a variety of factors. Here are some that drive whether we decide to delist a digital asset. And this is what they've listed here. Commitment of team and project, team to project, level and quality of development activity, network smart contract stability, level of public communication, responsiveness to our periodic due diligence requests, evidence of unethical/fraudulent conduct, contribution to a healthy and sustainable crypto ecosystem. And then they said, based on their most recent review, they've decided to delist and cease trading on all trading pairs of the following coin. And this will be from the 22nd onwards, the 22nd of April. So as you said, Chris, this is really quick. I don't think we expected this, but they've listed Bitcoin SV, BCH SV. So this was their official announcement. And then following that, we actually had, so CZ was writing on Twitter and saying, the real Satoshi can digitally sign any message to prove that this is as simple as breathing to him or her. And we have a public key. Until then, everyone is Satoshi except Craig Wright. And then he says, lastly, anyone who supports BSV from a tech perspective should be attacking the fraudulent Craig Wright, who is poisoning your community, and not attack the rest of the world. Anyone thinking Craig Wright is Satoshi should read about how a private key works, i.e. learn about crypto. So that's pretty strong words there from CZ. And it is a good point, though, because a lot of the attacks you hear in the BSV community, it does seem to be very defensive of Craig Wright and very much outwardly attacking other people. Like, you shouldn't be saying this, you shouldn't be doing this, you'll be sorry and you'll bear the brunt of the lawsuits, you shouldn't be, it's very outward looking. And you don't see much criticism within BSV of Craig Wright, which I find really disappointing.
Well, it wouldn't be anything without Craig Wright. I mean, it's Satoshi's vision. He's claiming to be Satoshi. It's his vision. I mean, it is one of the most self-centered coins out there that I can think of. Not many coins have a single person driving it nearly as much as BSV does. Now, don't get me wrong. I have seen fans of BSV, or at least fans of what they're doing, who don't jump to Craig's defense, but they don't tend to attack him or criticize him either. They just more or less stay silent on the matter, which is unfortunate. But they know as well as everybody else that if you piss off Craig, he's going to go nuclear on you, or you just really have no idea what his response will be.
Yeah,
he might make his own internet just because you're trolling him. And it's just really, really quite interesting to see how the public is responding to this so severely. One of the responses, of course, Kraken, we talked about, they have a poll up on Twitter. Let me pull that up real quick here because it's fun.
Did you vote in it?
I did vote in it, yes. I'm not going to say how I voted, but yes, I voted in it. I wish they had made their options a bit less politicized, but that's okay. Like, yes, I don't like it versus yes, it's toxic, but whatever. Right. But yeah, as of this time, there are, since I checked 10 minutes ago, 5,000 more votes showed up. So there are 21,000 votes. 75% say yes, it's toxic. 18% say don't care. And a combined total of 7% say no for the two options for no. So it is, the crypto Twitter is solidly on the anti-Craig Wright and anti-BSV side. It is, pretty obvious here. I don't think we have to argue much about that based on the overall sentiment on that matter. But at the same time, do we want to delist a coin just because it's unpopular? I mean, is that really what we want to set about? I mean, we're basically cheering on these centralized exchanges saying, hey, we don't like this guy, you should blacklist him. At the same time, that's free market. I'm
Yeah,
not
I
saying
think
it's not free
that that's an interesting point you bring up, because I think sometimes we fall into the trap of, especially as libertarians, a lot of people in this community being very open. A lot of people are like, oh, open borders, or all of this stuff. And people forget that just because you don't want government involvement in different things, that people should, necessarily approve of different things and associate with certain things that they otherwise might not want to. Now, in a situation like this, I think you have a private exchange that has decided we don't want to do this and are publicly disassociating themselves from it. And, just because I think the community is kind of rallying around this, I mean, you could look at it in two different ways, right? You could look at it, as you said, on the one hand thinking, oh, well, these people wield too much power. They shouldn't have the ability to take this thing off. People should have the ability to trade this, let the market decide, and maybe the price will just be lower, but it should be on exchanges, etc. Mm-hmm. But I think no one has the right to force themselves on an exchange. If people want to exchange this, there are plenty of decentralized exchanges out there where you could still do this. I think that it's a good thing if you have people in the community that you find credible and that you trust, and they're banding together under the same cause and fighting for something to uphold certain standards in the industry. And if they believe that something goes against those standards, then saying, no, we're not going to tolerate this. And it will be interesting to see, like at the moment, crypto is in this strange gray area where the government isn't that involved in exchanges. Places like Binance are relatively decentralized, or they're trying to make themselves so. So they're kind of all over the world in different jurisdictions. So they're not really at the behest of any single government, apart from the US government, because everything's always at the behest of the US government. But you know what I'm saying? Like it's They have the right to make their choices, and there's no one out there who has the ability to say, well, you have to list them. And so I think this is a really interesting turn of events. And then when you're talking about the poll, so CZ actually retweeted this and said, so the question was, should Kraken delist Bitcoin SV? And he replied, oh, Jess Powell will do it. I have a feeling, ... Hashtag crypto industry is tighter and stronger than you think. And this is a really interesting development that we've seen as well, because it's also more conflicted and divided than we often think as well. We have all these different camps. They're all competing for the glory of like the one true coin, or, they're all trying to take market share, or, there's been this very abrasive atmosphere in crypto, especially when you have forks of certain coins. And people take that as like a personal affront, like, how dare you fork and do your own thing? We should all stick together and be forced to live under the same rules, even if we disagree with them. And that's sort of been the narrative, people talking about how toxic the crypto environment is. And then here you see people just coming together and saying, all right, let's all agree on this one thing. And I think that's kind of heartening to see that people have the ability across different chains, across different currencies, across different philosophies of what crypto should be. They're coming together and saying, this is something we can agree on. And I think that's really promising, that there's that sort of level of rationality there. And you saw that, like Erik Voorhees tweeted the other day. Let me see if I can find it, because we'll talk about Shapeshift in a second. But let me just... let me pull that up. But he basically said, isn't it ironic that in the past, both real Satoshi and fake Satoshi have brought us all together? And I think that's a great point, because we all came together because of Bitcoin. This is what created this whole thing. And then suddenly you see the industry really uniting again. It does seem around kind of ostracizing Craig Wright. So it's an interesting turn of events.
Yeah, I agree that, old place I worked, my boss apparently was getting tired of some people and was being passive aggressive. So he put up a sign that said, you can be a great example. I'm sorry, backing up, wrong one. Everybody brings cheer, sometimes when they show up and sometimes when they leave. And so, Craig's not bringing good cheer through showing up, but man, everybody's sure happy about him getting kicked out. So I think it's very interesting. It somewhat replicates the overall trend right now, like the argument about social media and like, should they have the right to kick people out that nobody likes, yada, yada, yada. And, it's probably not a valid comparison because Craig is Craig and nobody likes Craig. Um, I mean, it's just how it is. And the people he surrounds himself with, his biggest defenders, Calvin's pretty bad too. But they have a lot of money. I mean, Calvin has legitimate billions and he can throw millions at Craig and let him play around with it. It doesn't really affect him that much. So, and at no point am I really making a definitive statement on whether Craig is or isn't Satoshi, because he could be. He could have lost his keys to those original blocks. He could have gotten some money in hand and went absolutely insane.
He could have suddenly forgotten how blockchains work, and that explains why he said things that are kind of technically incompetent. There are lots of explanations for this. We don't know. And also, it shouldn't be an issue. The whole reason why we liked the idea of Satoshi being a pseudonymous character is that you wouldn't hold someone up and say, well, their word is gospel, the glory of Satoshi, whatever they say we will follow. And now that's sort of turned on its head, because now you have not only people are actually doing that, but they're not even doing that to someone that they know 100% is Satoshi. So there's like speculation, there's this strange thing. So there's this undercut, like it makes it more divided than ever. It's even worse than if someone had come out and proven that they're Satoshi and people just disagree with them. Like, this creates this undercurrent of like suspicion and everything. And CZ, he tweeted, I think, this was today as well, this morning. He says, do the right thing. And he retweeted a post where it said, Binance will delist. And as we mentioned, people are following suit. So you have Erik Voorhees, who said, we stand with Binance and CZ's sentiments. We've decided to delist Bitcoin SV from Shapeshift within 48 hours. So that's even sooner than Binance plans to do it. And I just think that's really interesting. People are wondering, why is everyone delisting at the same time? Is this some big conspiracy? What's going on? But I think you have a player in the industry that is causing a lot of harm, is trying to use status control over people, coercion from the state to make people to align in a voluntary system where that sort of thing shouldn't apply. And this is sort of the industry turning around and saying, we don't want that. We don't want this a part of it, so we're not going to support it. Yes, you have the right to exist. You can go and exist outside of the entities that we control. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's great. I mean, I doubt CZ and Jesse Powell have a whole bunch in common, politically speaking. I mean, when you get right down to it, I'm pretty sure they're pretty different people. Now, Jesse and Erik have a lot more in common in that regard. But even with those differences, they are able to come together and kick out somebody who is very toxic and not a good participant in the crypto community. But that's also something, I don't know, it made me think about communities, and when they get to a, it's so hard for them to actually continue on as free market communities versus centrally controlled. And so keeping things smaller and more manageable, in my mind, is a good thing for the crypto space, having more and more individual independent communities that all have the same general area they're playing in, but they're not too large and huge and managed by a single populist personality.
I think there are people who are also conflating the issue, like some people in the chat who are saying, like, this is a very centralized decision. Crypto is meant to be decentralized. There's nothing decentralized about a third-party platform that has a CEO, and I mean it's not a bad thing. The decentralized nature of crypto has nothing to do with the existence of third-party applications, which is always going to happen. It's that there are no barriers to entry for other third-party applications to come into play and compete with people. So if Craig wants to create an exchange and come into play and list BSV, he's welcome to. This isn't a centralized decision where there's this sort of a monopoly on crypto listings. People have the ability to create their own exchanges and list things, use decentralized exchanges. This is a private company that's deciding whether or not to do this. So I disagree with the sentiment that this is like centralized and a bad thing. Like, that's not that's not the decentralized part that matters in Bitcoin, which has to do with the mining and the verification, all that. This has nothing to do with that.
And that's something a lot of people misunderstand about the concept of decentralization. I mean, some people are so married to that concept that they think it needs to be decentralized all the way down. until of course it comes to their own decisions, which by nature are very decentralized. Are very centralized. You are making your own decisions. So it's impossible to be decentralized all the way down. And so people think that, well, this one organization isn't decentralized, so that means the whole industry isn't decentralized. No, that's not how that works. I mean, like, we have a fairly decentralized restaurant industry in the United States. That doesn't mean every individual restaurant is decentralized and is ruled by consensus, but that means that if one restaurant kicks you out or you don't like, you can go to another one. It's a decentralized food production system or food dispensing system. So when you think about decentralization, try not to focus on any one part and think that means because this one part is centralized, the whole thing is centralized.
I agree.
So that's something people need to think about more when they're arguing about decentralization and what they're actually going for. What is their goal? I mean, even a completely centralized coin issued by a bank or company or whatever with no public mining, no nothing, adds decentralization to the financial system because we're trying to remove control of that from solely being in the hands of the state. So it doesn't matter if you like that coin versus other coins that maybe take decentralization further. But when you look at the picture as a whole, even overly centralized individual actors can add to the decentralization of the entire system.
And I also want to point out something that someone else brought up in the chat. And actually, before I do that, I want to say a huge thank you to Anonymous, who I know is actually Tao, who sent through a power chat in Bitbacker. I really appreciate that. $10 in Bitcoin Cash and says Bitbacker is awesome. I really appreciate that, Tao. That's so awesome. And also, Google doesn't take 30% of that one, and I get crypto instead of dirty fiat. So it's always wonderful. So I appreciate that. But one thing I want to bring out that someone said in the chat when they're talking about like bailouts, and let's just point out how different this is to the financial system that crypto people are trying to get away from. When you had the financial crisis in 2008, you had all of these banks being bailed out. You had like decades, and you could say like a century of moral hazards where they're just doing these bad things, making poor decisions, knowing that the government will come along and bail them out at the end of the day, and they won't be held accountable for their mistakes. And so you had people in banking institutions who were dealing with really dodgy products that they really shouldn't be dealing with, but there was no incentive for people to cut them off and say, no, we're not dealing with that, we're not going to get involved. Like, there were very few banks that decided not to get involved in that stuff. BB&T Bank was a really good one during this. On the other side of things, you had like Bear Stearns, was it Countrywide, and but you just had all these things that people like, there's awful products that people were using knowing that they were bad, and there was no incentive to cut them off. And on the other side of things, now you have the crypto world. You see people who are looking at products, looking at ethos around developer groups, looking at the principles that different currencies or projects are standing on, and there are people choosing to disassociate. They're choosing to say, well, we know that we're not going to be bailed out at the end of the day if we have bad products out there or we do things that could hurt people. We need to support things that create a good culture in this ecosystem, because that's the ethos of like voluntarism. If we're in this voluntarily, then we want to do our part to cultivate like a good culture, and they're deciding of their own volition to cut off things that they don't agree with. I mean, that's so far removed from the financial world that we've seen in the past.
Well, our culture, I mean, one of the big complaints during the bailouts was that they had, centralized profits and socialized losses. So the banks kept all the profits, and then everybody else paid when they lost, which is a horrible system. It's a corporatist system that is not capitalism, despite what everybody says it is. And that's what we're trying to avoid in this system, is that it makes it impossible to socialize losses and centralize gains. So we don't like that system. And what we see here is individual actors, as you said, making choices of whether or not to associate it. Now, in our country, we have limited ability of freedom of association. There are certain reasons that we can't disassociate from people. Fortunately, I don't like him, he's a jerk face, is a perfectly legitimate reason to disassociate. So we're not going to run afoul of any of that in this country right now. But what we have here is, again, private corporations and private individuals making individual decisions. Now, saying the crypto industry is tighter and works together, that's not necessarily a great thing. But as you said, BSV can make their own exchange where you can buy and sell BSV. I mean, that's what they can do. There's nothing stopping them. They have no right to be listed on any of these exchanges. They have no right that other people's services include them. Now he'll make a whole bunch of, antitrust and blah, blah, blah threats of lawsuits.
Oh yeah, because that's what we want in in crypto is like antitrust laws, like part of the worst things of the US economy. Don't make any sense at all. I mean, there are also people who are wondering saying like, oh,
that's what he'll pull later.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, they're just saying, that's what Craig will do. I mean, Craig threatens lawsuits all the time, and he will respond to this just like that. So I haven't even looked to see if he's tweeted anything recently. I don't even know if he got back on Twitter. I've not been paying attention enough.
I don't know. He blocked me a long time ago, so I can't look for my account. So you guys let me know if he's been tweeting anything interesting we should bring up. Then you tell us. But there are people who are a bit dismayed about this, saying that there are a bunch of people who are just pretending that it's not a big deal that they're being delisted from exchanges, when in actual fact it's like a huge deal, and that's how all the value's derived, and that's the only thing that matters here. And again, if another exchange wants to list it, that's totally fine. They don't have any right to be listed on someone's private exchange, as you mentioned, Chris. It's not how it works here. And if private exchange decides not to list it, then that's fine. And yes, obviously, the consequence of this is that the price will tank, because there's just no price discovery. If there's no liquidity there, if there's no liquidity, people don't see it as a value and having value. And so, yes, this is going to have effects, and no one's pretending otherwise. But I think that that's the point. It's about price discovery. It's about saying we do not think this is a valuable thing for our customers. We're cutting it off. And then maybe if it's on other exchanges, the prices might reflect the fact that it's been cut off from so many exchanges. That's obviously what happens in this sort of voluntary system.
Yep. Sorry, I was looking at Calvin's Twitter just now, and a couple hours ago, Jack C. Liu is returning to partner with OKX to launch a Bitcoin SV-based exchange. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, just reading the headline there. So speaking of opening their own exchange, fine, they'll open their own exchange with hooker and blackjack, and who needs the exchange anyway? And then his comment on Binance was, so childish, illegal, and corrupt. What monkey with Ethereum and exchanges have...
Oh no, you got to say that again. You got to say
forcing a judge
Chris,
to pass judgment.
You got to say it again, because you cut out there and it froze. And this just sounds very interesting and delightfully entertaining. So say that again.
I mean,
you got to do it. You got to do it, and say it with like your storytelling voice.
Read the Calvin Iyer tweet again.
Do it.
Or the blackjack. Okay. So childish, illegal, and corrupt. What monkey business do Ethereum and exchanges have going on that this is the reaction to Craig forcing a judge to pass judgment on the origins of Bitcoin by suing Vitalik and Liable? Vitalik for libel. Wow. So I could do my so childish and corrupt. What monkey business do Ethereum and whatever? I'll be done with that.
That was so enjoyable. Everyone, a round of applause, please. Let's
I can do my dramatic readings.
Let's give his dramatic reading the respect it deserves.
Yeah, they're freaking out about that. But even right before that, we have somebody opening up a BSV exchange. And that's the point. It's a BSV exchange. They can do it. It's a free market.
I think that's great. I love seeing new people entering the space and not complaining about, oh, well, such and such won't have us on that platform. Like, I like that. They're not doing that. They're just doing their own thing, which is what crypto is about. If you don't like something, you can fork away and do your own thing. So that sounds good. And I just got another power chat. Thank you so much. Someone sent $5 in Bitcoin Cash and says, do you think Craig will still pump BSV? That's a great question. I mean, is this a situation where he's going to cut his losses? I don't think so. I think that there's going to be a lot of sunk cost fallacy involved with this, a lot of ego involved with this. I mean, what do you predict is going to happen, Chris?
Well, I mean, what was the article I was reading the other day? Bitcoin SV miners have lost 2.2 million in mining costs since the launch. They're perfectly willing to continue with the losing money in this, I think, because I mean, they are trying to build something. There are some people on there. I mean, you have Hand Cash, you have these various other players out there trying to build stuff. So I don't expect they'll just hang up the towel right now, but I do expect that they'll get a lot less attention moving forward, and their price will more accurately reflect actual usage versus just speculating.
Yeah. Someone was also asking, like, saying that as much as they dislike Craig Wright, that it's troubling how easily someone could just get rid of this, transparent product and a reasonable product and just be able to blow them off. And I think that's an interesting point of view. I'm going to have to really disagree with it. I think we've gotten so used to this normalized situation where the government has the right to tell us how to run our businesses. And that's not how I think the world should work. Maybe you have a different point of view, Chris. I'm not sure. Maybe people in the chat disagree, but I think that it's great that a company has the right to decide for itself how it wants to do business, who it wants to do business with. I think that's wonderful. As little involvement and outside coercion as possible, the better, because we've seen in the past over and over again, outside coercion is often corrupt. It's often, political players who have their own agendas as well. Like, there is no situation where people are protected and we can make sure that right decisions are being made, and it just doesn't exist. So allowing individual companies to make their own decisions seems like the best situation right here.
Agreed. Completely and 100% agree, because that is what we're trying to create, is actual free markets with nobody being able to stand at the top and say, you can't do something, you can't compete, or reality, you must follow all these regulations to join in the industry, which realistically no new incomer can do and maintain a profit. So even though, these are huge, big players, but I mean, Binance was not big before the 2017 pump. I seriously doubt that Binance will be the number one exchange when the next pump happens.
Right.
Because we'll have new players coming in with new, better tech, and somebody else will manage to take that over. This is all about competition. It's important when you're looking at these markets not to look at a single point in time, but look at the breadth of the market over time. And it's not even close to monopoly now, but it'll get more and more and more decentralized as time goes forward, as more and more competitors enter the scene. And I think that's nothing but good. And nobody has a right to somebody else's work. And so SV and Craig do not have a right to be on any of these exchanges. It's at their will. I mean, if they had a contract, if they paid for listing and there was something on the listing that gave them a right to be delisted for certain reasons, fine. But there's no inherent right that these exchanges list any one coin or any other coin.
Right.
So,
sorry, go ahead.
No, it's important to remember when you're dealing with free markets, you're trying to, if your position requires that somebody be forced into doing something they want to do, that is a status position.
Yeah. Now, do you think there should be more transparency in Binance disclosing why they've delisted BSV as like a service to their users, saying, well, these are the reasons? I mean, it seems pretty obvious why they're choosing to do it from my point of view, but do you think that they should have some sort of official response about this?
In an ideal world, I would appreciate more of an official response from them. That being said, anything they say can and will be used in any future lawsuit against them. So it is to their best interests in terms of legal issues to say what they have said and then to stop talking about it. Because anything they say, then there's another angle for a lawyer to come in and say, oh, you were biased because of this, or you delisted them for these other reasons, So the less they say, legally speaking, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there are still developments to come. Kraken, as of this moment, has not decided what they're going to be doing, but I tend to agree with CZ. I think that Jesse Powell is pretty much on the ball when it comes to supporting things in the crypto ecosystem that have a good philosophy underpinning them. And I think that he, especially talking about like what Kraken has done in the past, I mean, they've been the subject of lawsuits from BSV, or well, I shouldn't say from BSV, it can't really be from BSV, but from Craig and N-Chain, and I think that this, it wouldn't surprise me if they then did follow and decide to delist it as well. Now, what we can say from this is if there are people out there who are thinking, well, this is terrible, BSV should be listed, then I think that if anything, I mean, that will probably spur people onto either creating more competition in the marketplace where they can create their own exchanges, or perhaps more investment into decentralized exchanges. Because as much as I'm cheering this and I do support this decision from these companies, I also do really appreciate having freedom of choice out there and options when you do have centralized exchanges. At the moment, I mean, it seems to be in my best interest. You know, I'm not a supporter of BSV. It doesn't affect me whether they're listed or not. I like that they're taking a stand against what I think is bad behavior. But at the end of the day, you know, it kind of works in my favor. There may come a situation where I think that a centralized exchange may make a decision that I disagree with. And that could be a bad thing, right? And also when you have centralized exchanges, it can be a pressure point for governments to pressure if they want certain things delisted. That's always a worry as well. So that is an issue that I think we are going to become more aware of. And as things like this happen, like maybe people in the BSV camp, this will really motivate them to put more resources into DEXs and into getting rid of some of the friction that we've seen with DEXs so far. I think that's a great turn of events. So I really hope that happens. I hope that more people start putting funding and research into DEXs, and I hope that that does become the future, because that would be a world where, you know, as much as I like these major players doing things when it's in my best interest, the ideal world would be to always have options and have decentralized things that no one could coerce.
I 100% agree. I think as time goes on, it'll just be easier and easier to exchange one coin or token for another, and you'll not really have to worry even about where you're doing it. I expect shapeshift like services will become more and more common and popular.
Well, previous shapeshift like services, way before they had
Yes.
to do all the KYC compliance, which people have issue with. But honestly, if you're at the behest of the US government, you can either take a stand and live the rest of your life in jail, or you comply and change your business model. And they started out really wanting to fight for anonymity and all of that. It ended up that the government just doesn't allow that to happen in the US at all. So it makes sense that they had to pivot there, and I don't begrudge them not wanting to hand over their entire business.
Yeah, I understand why they did. I rarely use them anyway, so it's not like it's drastically affecting me personally. I understand why people didn't like it, but you know, they have to do what they have to do to stay in business. Either you can just close the shop and fire all your employees and not make any difference, or try to keep going on and still try to make a difference. I understand why he made the choice he did. You know, that being said, though, you're going to have atomic swaps more and more common and easy to use in the future, and there'll just be more and more ways to do things. So, and in my hope, at least, there'll be more and more people actually exchanging crypto for goods and services at a merchant and business level. So more and more of our liquidity will come from actual usage, and there'll be more and more tools geared towards those merchants, so that, you know, I pay you smart cash, you get your, you know, Dogecoin, and it's all well and good. Hopefully you're not asking for Dogecoin as a merchant, but but you know, it'll hopefully, as time goes on, become much easier and easier for merchants to be able to accept whatever crypto and exchange it instantly right then and there.
Right.
So that's what I'm going for.
And it may be worthwhile in a future episode, Chris, if you're up to it, looking at options that people have that are out there that are similar to the model Shapeshift used to have. Like, is there anything at the moment that operates outside of KYC? How do people find it? That could be something that's valuable to people who are obviously outside of the US, because in the US that would not be legal. But maybe we could do an episode talking about some of the options outside the US in case people are interested.
Yeah, absolutely. There are options out there you can do, and it'd be great to cover some of those, because people should know, and hopefully we're going to start getting more and more newbies in the market, and they need to know too.
Absolutely. Well, let's wrap it up there. As I said, we're keeping an eye on what's going on with Kraken. They have made no announcements so far about what they're going to be doing, but all eyes are sort of on them. Are they going to be following Voorhees and CZ and delisting? That remains to be seen. So we'll keep you updated and all that. Thank you so much, everyone who's been here in the chat listening. I am now also on D Live as well, so I am testing that out to see how streaming goes there. If anyone wants to follow me there, I'd really appreciate it. I have 4 followers followers at the moment, and I'm quite pleased with that. So thank you to the 4 people who follow me there. And huge thank you to the people who used the power chat today, to Anonymous and to Tao for sending through those power chats, and also Tao for sending through the super chat. Really appreciate your support of the channel. This entire thing is run by people's support from the community like you, so I really appreciate that. But thank you so much everyone in the chat. As I said, we'll keep you loasted. We will keep you posted, and Chris will both be in the Telegram group throughout the day, keeping people updated on the latest news. So we'll be on Twitter as well if anyone wants to look at that. Also on Bitbacker if anyone wants to keep up with the latest. But otherwise, we'll probably check back in tomorrow and just update you all. But thank you so much for joining us today. It has been a lot of fun.
Sayonara, everyone.
And bye.